Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we are doing an art journaling page. And for this video, I'm really going to walk you through at least like the 5 basic steps that I usually take when creating a page. These can sometimes go out of order, but overall, whenever I'm art journaling, I like to work on a background. So that means plunking down some paint, spraying, spritzing, the background with a few colors and let them mix. Whatever it is, step 1, like do something to the background. Then I like to add collaging. So collage papers, that could include scrapbooking papers, that can be actual tissue papers, anything that this is going to be submerged into the background. For some people that play, they like actually sometimes to do the collaging first by adding all of this down and then adding the paint on top. So this is where I get into the idea that it can be out of order, but in essence, these 5 kind of steps will definitely have an art journal page come together rather quickly. So first, background. Second, collage. And the collage can be, like I said, multitude of things. Then after the collaging and your background are done, that's when I then go in with any stamping and stenciling. So stamping and stenciling, so I just pulled a few stencils. So, anything that you have in your stash, you can go through these with your paint, with like a paint dauber, or doing it with texture paste or texture butter, or there's a lot of different colors on the market, doing anything with your stamps and stencils. However, I will say when doing the two, always do your stamping first, because when you do this, especially with texture paste or anything else, then this has to dry. So do stamping, anything to grunge up the background. These are just some of the ones I just reached for right now that were in my active in rotation. So, some background stamping to grunge up a background, add interest, more of a focal point kind of one. Definitely a highly focal image, around that border. And I always have that stamping in case I want to add like a title word. And then I would go in with the stenciling after that. That way that has time to dry, and then you can see where your layout is coming together. Then after stamping and stenciling, I would definitely select a focal image. So focal images can be like your paper dolls from Tim Holtz. They can be little caricatures, like from this one. This is an Art by Marlene, like die cut pack. These could definitely be put on your page, and then maybe make her a shirt or something, or a dress, but something that's going to be the focal image on it. I was just pulling out, these are more just collage papers, so collage actual papers from Dina. These are rice paper, collage papers from Art by Marlene. These are just some of the brands that I tend to gravitate towards. Your focal image, I know I have pulled one, can also be like magazine images, which I think is what we're going to do for this one, not the bag. It was this girl. This black and white image. So I'll cut her out. I just thought black and white, it'll go with any color background I'll have. And that she'll be my focal image for this example. But I also, pulled out some of these faces. I pulled out this face too. This is a Dina Wakely one, cut that out, and that could be your focal. So just something. And it doesn't have to be a figure or a face. It could be animals, birds, it could be maybe something else that you drew, or a tag can go on your page, and that'll be your focal image. And then after all that's said and done, I just have the last part being like embellish / mark making. So that's when you go in with maybe like your paint markers. And I always like, so even in this instance, when I'll show you, like once I plunk that down, it'll look like she's just sitting on top of it. So I'll go in after the fact and maybe add some stamping like on her arms and stuff, so that she starts blending into the background that we've created. I might go in with just a little corner of the stencil and get some on her so that she looks like a part of that background, and not just sitting on top. And then go over and make like little marks, marks with paint pens. That's always something that people finish with. I also like to finish with a title. And so that's my like category of like embellishing it. And then like, maybe putting something that's going to be like overlaid on her just a little bit. Maybe the quote goes across her and stuff. So that way she gets, a little bit suppressed into the background that you've created, and it has a little bit more of a cohesive look. So just flipping through my journal, for instance, because I know you've seen some of these. So that's what I meant, like, even for this. So we did, remember, the paint, the stamping, the stenciling, and then I add her, but you can see, like, after the fact, I put some stamping on those flowers. I did a little bit more of that stenciling. I grunged her up to make her look like she was part of it, having the stencil overlay, and then finish off with a title. Similar here too. So the focal image, you can see I stenciled right around here, added, this is me embellishing on top of it, the title pieces on top of her, in order for that to just, like I said, get suppressed into the background. I think there's another one in here. Yeah, even here too, you know, always after the fact, you can see like I go with some stamping that's over my focal image at the time. The quotes on top of her, this embellishment on top of that focal image, and it just has it all come together rather nicely. So for today, like I said, I'm working in an art journal page, an art journal book. This will be my focal, and I pulled out a few of the images / stencils and stamps that I want to use in it. So I think, yeah, I have all of these. You know, scrapbooking paper. Oh, I also had these as focal images. These are collage sheets from Dilutions, and these are like magazine clippings from like her book herself, and you can pick a head and a body and legs and create like your own little image too. These are just examples, and so these are available. So there are products out there that make kind of this 5-step process a little bit more doable, especially if you're not artistically inclined. You know, like for me too, like I don't know how to draw female figures, but I'll cut one out of a magazine, or I don't know how to draw female figures, but I'll buy Dina Wakley's version of it, because I mean, maybe if I practice I could do this one, but that's what helps. And since I like doing this so much anyway, I'm willing to, you know, buy product that lets me get the look of what I want to do without necessarily being artistically inclined to actually, you know, do it myself. So just keep that in mind, that these products that I'm just showing you are just a way for you to, you know, have the look without being necessarily completely a drawer or a doodler, but just wanting to play with some products. So I think I'm going to we're going to paint the background. I think I'm going to rip this up for some of my collage element, just for some striking black, high contrast. We are going to stamp and stencil with some of this. I'm going to cut this out, and my stamps are over here. And let's get started. Okay, so like my steps say, let's work on the background. So in this step, you can use paint like I am, and I am just going on directly as if it was my palette, just because this part can be as sloppy as you can make it. This can also be done with inks and sprays, so spray a couple of inks on your page and move on. You don't even have to cover the entire page. You can just do a portion, and that can get you a really interesting look as well. Then when I move into collage, I'm just taking this black and white kind of bold printed sheet. It looks like a little village, but like when you cut it into strips, all you get is the nice like contrasting graphic of it all. And once again, this can be placed wherever you want. They can be placed all together. They can be placed on one side. For me, I was just trying to balance out a little bit on the left, a little bit on the right, just because in my head, since I already had that magazine image in mind for my focal one, I knew it was going to take up a majority of the center of the page. So I made sure to keep the interesting parts to the left and the right side. Now we're moving on to the stamping and stencils section. So here I am just taking archival ink. Excuse me. Archival ink is important to use because archival ink will not budge if you do any sort of wet medium on top. Keep that in mind when you're doing this. I do have other ink pads like pigment or dye, but in those cases, those inks will move if you start adding more sprays or liquids on top, or if you go on top with anything that can be water reactive with it. So archival is the best bet when you want that image to stay put. So I'm just making sure, once again, I put a scattering of some fine line ones and some bolder ones with the numbers. That part, you know, whichever you have in your collection, even if it is alpha stamps, if you only have letters and stuff, those would work for this as well. So once you have some of the stamping done, then you're going to choose your, you know, stenciling. Stenciling, what do you want to use? So for me, I'm showing you I'm using Luna paste. These are colorful texture paste, but white modeling paste would do just fine in this. I know this line also offers them in glitter, and just take a stencil and kind of go through it. Now with this step, you will need to let it dry between moving on, because this takes a while to dry completely. Could you go in with it wet and get another kind of look, because some of it would get smushed and moved around? Absolutely. But for a stenciling one, if you don't want it to move and move on quickly, I would just use paint with like a paint sponge, a dauber, and kind of, you know, buff it through a stencil, and that way you can move on without stopping your creative process. So once it was dry, I let it dry maybe 30 minutes or so just to make sure it was nice and hard. You can go on to your focal image. Now for this example, I'm using just a magazine image. I constantly have magazine images whenever I go to the library and they are throwing out a few, or it's in like the recycling bin. I will just pick up whatever is there. I tend to find striking female poses like this in fashion magazines, but I do take, you know, the cooking ones too, and get good food pictures, or even if it's like a home interior, you know, you can get a nice stage of a living room or something, and that could be your focal image. So it could be whatever you want. This can also be where I was showing you the idea of the Dina Wakley collage papers. In order to have your focal image be incorporated into your background, you just saw I went in with a little bit more stamping. I stamped on her arms. It's very faint, still in that purple archival ink, just because you want it to be kind of incorporated. So if it's just stilling on top, it won't look so good. Now here's where I was trying to add a little bit more stenciling to incorporate her too, but this stenciling that I did with this did not work out good. It doesn't look too good. You know, I had the idea to wipe it off, but I was like, no, leave it. It's just the details of it did not come out good, and I should have known better because it was already like a lumpy textured background with everything I already had added with the collage and the previous stenciling with texture paste, that this one didn't come out as detailed as I thought it would. But I moved on, you know, que sera, sera. We're moving on to the next step, which in my, you know, understanding of art journaling is mark making. So I'm taking Posca paint pens in this regard. You can do this with regular pen and a detailed brush. I just happen to have a collection of some Posca paint pens, and I'm just going in first with like some little like plus marks all around the page, and I'm making sure to get some on the focal image, into the background, just so like once again it tends to start to look like incorporated and on, you know, part of the overall art piece, rather than just like this bold, you know, image sitting on top with nothing kind of interacting with it. That's always, I guess, key, is having it interact. I even like the fact that the image goes off the page with her elbow half off, so that that interactiveness is already there. Then, like I said, I always like a title. This step is completely optional, but I'm taking a piece of vellum. This is vellum that I just used. You can see some samples on the top when I didn't stamp too good. And on vellum, you need to use Stays-On ink. So I'm teaching you all about it. Stays-On is because this is oil-based, so it's able to sit on top of a slick surface like vellum. This also works Stays-On on photo paper. So anytime you're using a slick surface and you want it to dry, because if I used it on anything else, like say I used archival, it would take forever to dry on this because it's just kind of sitting on top. So I finished up by gluing that vellum with there's glue in the fine liner, which is Fabri-Tac. And I put it just where the black is, so it wasn't in the clear, so that you didn't see like the glue striations. You could have stapled it too with a tiny tacher. That would have worked. But I'm going to leave it as so. This still has to dry. That stenciling that didn't turn out so great, but what are you going to do? I mean, maybe I could wipe it off, but I think it would just leave a glob, and at least now it's a little bit textured. That's the only thing that kind of went to the pits. But this is part of art journaling, you know. I've learned a couple things. I got a page done. This didn't work out, too great, so I will keep that in my head for the next time. But other than that, I just want to show you the approach can be attainable and not so timid. Now, me too, I was also thinking just even extending it further, that I could like stamp these out in like maybe like a bold turquoise or aqua ink and cut them out and then have like flourishes come out. But that, you know, as you get comfortable with art journal, you can embellish further. But for a page that just follows, you know, the steps I gave you of a background with sprays or paints, collage elements, you know, we did the tissue in the back, and or, you know, if you had book paper or anything else, like I said, scrapbook paper could have given you that dimension. It just gives you dimension. Worked out great. We did stamps and stencils. So stencils, stamps, that part got taken care of. Then we did the focal image, so whatever you may choose, a big flower. And then we did mark making / embellishing. So the mark making was all with the Posca pens. We did some more stenciling to, like I said, to incorporate her into the background. I stamped a little bit more like on her arm so that she gets, you know, submerged into it. And then a title is usually where I go to usually. That's just me. I like them to always have some sort of like statement. Even the one page before here, I did this art journal page, still in purples, and it says authentic. on here. So that's just something that I like to do. It could have been a quote as well. So play with those 5 steps and see how far along you can get. Even as you repeat them, you'll notice that you do maybe more stenciling and less stamping, or maybe you have multiple focal images where you play with, like a triangle kind of thing. Maybe you play with quotes in your background instead of just like a bold word or a statement. All those things, as you get familiar with this process and comfortable, that's always what it is, comfortable, take the 15-30 minutes it took me a day. For me, I clearly film those, so it takes a little bit longer. But if I were to sit down with 15-30 minutes before I went to bed and did something like this, you get better each time. And that's all I want to encourage you, is that if you've been intimidated to start with those 5 steps per page and see the variation you get. Because even I'm sure once you try it out, your page will look totally different than mine. And that's the beauty of your art journal. It's you playing with art supplies, your art, and learning how they work and creating something beautiful and moving on and learning from, any mistakes, like I said, like I had, that I won't, stencil on top of stenciling is pretty much what I think happened. It just wasn't like a smooth surface. And I've learned that before, but I think I still try to experiment. Like, let's see if I throw some hot pink through the flowery one and get a little thing, because if it came out good, that would have been great, but it still comes out poorly. So thank you so much for joining me. Please subscribe if you are new to my channel. I do, scrapbooking, memory keeping, and I dabble in my art journal from time to time, and I do love it because, again, it's practice. I like it. It's colorful, which is what also I like, and I buy just as much art supplies as I do scrapbooking, supplies, so I have to utilize everything that I purchase, Till next time, everyone, thank you for spending time with me. Bye!